Volunteer of the Year Award was first presented in 1998 to recognize volunteerism in Westmount. Now in its 20th year, it has been given annually to an especially tireless volunteer whose work in the community has made Westmount a better place to live. In 2004, the award was renamed in honor of the late Derek Walker, one of the most dedicated and respected volunteers in Westmount. Derek Walker s'est distingué par son dévouement extraordinaire au bénévolat. À l'âge de 88 ans, il consacrait encore 3 jours par semaine au service communautaire. On behalf of the Westmount Municipal Association, it is my great pleasure to announce that this year's recipient of the Derek Walker Volunteer of the Year Award is awarded to Ms. Angela Murphy.
It's an honor to be invited to say a few words about Angela Murphy, Chief Judge, for the McIntyre Writing Competition. During her 8 years in this position, the competition's grown in stature and numbers. Last count, around 1,800 school children wrote a story or poem or essay. And that was this year, and Angie's played no small part in this success, as she's a tireless volunteer dedicated to supporting childhood literacy. Much of her work is executed behind the scenes, and throughout the whole year, in fact. And in part, that's why I chose to nominate her. Angie has an uncanny knack, a talent for dreaming up annual themes that speak to the diversity of Westmount's school population. New Beginnings was a theme one year, Building Bridges another, and last year's was Secret Places, Hidden Treasures. 2018's theme, An Unexpected Kindness, is particularly apt for this evening's occasion. I have it on good authority that Angie jumped 10 feet high on hearing she's this year's recipient for the award. And she's usually unflappable. Her surprise surely speaks to her modesty and giving nature. As our children's librarian, Wendy Whalen, says in her supporting letter, Angie is a kind and thoughtful person. Every year she takes the time to bake delicious cookies for the librarians and volunteers who come to do the clerical work, which is considerable given those numbers, that ensures the judging is done anonymously. And she writes a personal handwritten note of thanks after the closing ceremony. So I hope that gives you just a brief idea of some of the behind the scenes work. I'm very happy the WMA's committee recognizes Angie's qualities, organizational skills, and her service to our community in this public presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Murphy, would you come to the front so we can to be acknowledged?
You're on video.
Very good.
No. Did you know you'd won? No. I was actually speechless, and that doesn't happen very often. I'm honoured to accept this award and to join the past recipients who've made incredible contributions to the Westmount community. Special thanks to Valerie for her kind words for nominating me, and for Wendy for seconding that nomination. It's nice to think that I was a worthwhile nomination, let alone to win, so that's even better. Mayor Peter McIntyre started his writing competition 47 years ago. And I realised the other day when I was talking to Wendy about that I probably began my volunteering career around that same time. Shows how old I am. Coaching physically challenged athletes, working in Romanian orphanages, and counselling survivors of traumatic events. These were things that were part of my life in England. I even parachuted out of a plane once because nobody else would volunteer. daughter was old enough to recognise that it was me that was jumping out. Now in Westmount, obviously I play a part in the fantastic organisation that's the McIntyre Creative Writing Competition. As you've been told, this year's event brought the largest number of entries to date. And without the commitment of the Children's Library staff and the 89 volunteer judges who took part, we wouldn't be one of the single biggest events on the Westmount calendar. So my thanks must go out to all those that are involved in our success. And I'm so pleased that members of the Children's Library are here tonight who work so tirelessly behind the scenes, and representatives of some of the judges. Thank you for coming to support me in this. I have to say that this is your success as well, so I'm going to accept this on behalf of all past, present and future volunteers for the McIntyre, because I know it's going to grow. I've often been asked, well, why do you do it? Why do you volunteer? I could say I do it to give back to my community, or that I want to help people, or that I've got skills, or that I get a good feeling from it, and it's probably all of these combined. But basically, I usually say that I do it because I can. There's no right way to volunteer. But the greatest thing about it is that it helps to build a strong community. And that's what the McIntyre competition is about. One of the elements is writing about community. And really, I say to everybody that there's power in giving your time. If you have time, please give it. Those of you that have heard me at the McIntyre presentation evenings know that I like to slip a little quote in from a famous author, and that usually marks the end of what I've got to say. So tonight is going to be no different. I'm going to quote Dr. Seuss. And this is a message for people thinking about volunteering. You might say, no, not I, no way, I've nothing to give. Not today anyway. But you'll see if you look deep inside of you, you've lots to give. It's true. You do. Thank you.
And she was so inspired by this that she created an organization called On Rule. And this has a web inventory of all sorts of accessible businesses, rented services, and there's a thing called Sesame.world, which is an alternative to traditional door opening systems. And she has a new concept of human accessibility. People often talk about universal accessibility, but Catherine will explain about human accessibility. She's a best-selling author with a book called Success from the Heart, published in 2005. And she's also a website designer and is currently a geek learning Android code for mobile applications. So without further ado, I'll invite Catherine to take the podium and we'll put her presentation on the screen. That's not the right one, is it? It's the other one. This one?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
So hi, I'm pretty glad to be here tonight to speak about human accessibility, but at the first point to open these discussions, I would like to speak about what is accessibility by itself, because usually you read a lot about it, but we don't know exactly what are the issues, what are the teams, what can be done. So I will make a quick overview about Westmount's accessibility, because I had the privilege to have a city tour last weekend, so I took a few pictures about it. So first of all, what's good about Westmount accessibility? You've done some low-speed street intersections, and you've done them well, because as you see, the trees are aligned with the cars and not on the sidewalks. It may seem like simple, but I've seen these kind of intersections where the trees were in the sidewalk line, which means someone that is blind may actually hit the trees because they don't think that the sidewalk can go over the trees. So these are a great thing. You also have really wide sidewalks, which means people have less obstacles, actually few obstacles to walk in, and we have walkers, wheelchairs, people walking, so it's really great. And these sidewalks also allow people in stores to have movable ramps. Movable ramps are really easy to put, and they actually can transform a non-accessible location into an accessible location. They are affordable, so it's really great thing. Other good things on the park, really amazing park. The bathrooms are accessible. The sink has space underneath, which means someone in a wheelchair can roll in and wash their hands really easily. Water fountain is accessible too. And you've built some forward crosswalk, allowing people to easily cross the roadsides, and the bump allows the cars to slow down, which reduces the risk of accidents. But Westmount has realities, and during my city tours, I just realized how much hills there were in Westmount. And having been in a wheelchair for months, I can tell that hills and wheelchair is not a good thing. So we have to live with this, that Westmount has a lot of hills. You also have a lot of split level stores, which means that even if we work at the entrance to make it accessible, once we enter the store, we face both stairs up and down. And it would cost a lot to just put an elevator at that place to make it accessible. So we have to figure out that some location and stores may remain inaccessible with the time. You also have a kind of architecture where the floors of the stores are higher than the street floor, which means we have to put ramps, but at some point the doors are really close to the sidewalk, which means we don't have the space to add these ramps. So we need to think that some stores still will remain inaccessible. Some challenges. As you see, Paul did the model for some pictures. So we saw some street lights buttons that were really way too high. There's no way someone in a wheelchair can actually reach that button. And at some point, they cannot go on the grass and access it. So there's something to think about it there, just to put them like half the height so people can better access it. And in the park, there is a trail with steps. So I know it's beautiful that it's been made like this, but I think we can do a really beautiful trail with a slope so people can access it and use it. We have water fountain. The first on the left should not be accessible because there is no place for the wheelchair to roll underneath. So the person has to bend to go up there to get the water. And the second model has place underneath, but the way it has been installed makes it inaccessible because of the cement, because of the sidewalk and the grass. Someone in a wheelchair or stroller will have trouble to access the water fountain. So it's interesting to think about what we do install, but also how we do install things to make them fully accessible. And we have a hook in the women's bathroom that again is really too high, so no way someone can access it from a wheelchair. But an easy fix could be just to have a second hook underneath or somewhere else in the bathroom so everyone can access the hook. Other challenges, there are a lot of sidewalks that have slope on it for no reason. On the left area, you see there's only one street exit, but still the whole sidewalk has a slope in it. And if you look on the bottom picture, the wide sidewalk, you see that the left area is flat and the right area has a little slope, which means when you're in a wheelchair, the wheelchair with the gravity will always seek to go on the left. And so it's really exhausting just to use that part of the sidewalk. Same thing with a stroller or a walker. So it's really subtle, but I can tell you that at the end of the day, it's really exhausting. And then we have the puddles, like we can go on the grass, but in a wheelchair, stroller, walker, it's really harder. Easy fixes, street condition. I can tell that Sherbrooke condition of the street is really like hard on my car with like, ooh, ah, bumps. But when you have wheels, chances are the wheels gonna just get fixed into these holes and the person can fall off, can hurt themselves, can create accidents. So an easy fix to improve accessibility would be just to improve quality of the roads. On the left side, on the left picture, you have also an access ramp that leads to few cornices. If we extend that access ramp, we may have 3 or more new accessible stores just by extending that access ramp. And on the right, you have some stores that have a little step at the entrance. If we just make the effort to change that little step into a slope, then we have 1, 2, like 4, 5 new accessible stores. Finally, on the left, there's another kind of non-accessible store that can easily be fixed because we have a little ramp and the step is not that high. And on the right, we have a really wonderful access ramp, but no handrail, which means that a blind person can hit themselves on the cement. And once he goes onto the access ramp, he doesn't have a clue when to stop, where to go. So an access ramp would really be useful in that case to improve accessibility. So that was just a quick overview, just to settle down some concepts, and I will let other people just keep on the discussion, and I'll be back again at the end. Thank you.
So let's just move to the next panelist. Let's bring the other presentation up here. Commissioner for Sustainability. She's a member of many of the important committees in the city: the Healthy City Project, Environment Committee, Community Life Committee, Transport Advisory Committee. She's been a resident of Westmount District 5 since 2007 and has been involved in Westmount activities for quite a long time, since early adolescence. She has expertise of a 20-year career as a director in advisory communications for many corporations, GE Capital, Rio Tinto, among others, and has worked on a number of lobbying-related initiatives at the federal level. And she holds a BA honours degree from Queen's University and a master's degree from Carleton University School of Journalism and Communications. And Marina was very involved in a citizen action group for the Grosvenor residents who were concerned about a development which would impinge on their quality of life with potentially overshadowing their street with a high building. And so inspired was she by that project that she ran for council and was elected by her neighbours. So I'd like Marina to take the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the WMA for inviting me to speak and participate in this panel. Thank you, members of the WMA. And I see many colleagues from council present: Mayor Smith, Councillor Bostock, Councillor Shami, and Councillor Peart. So thank you very much for attending as well. And thank you, Catherine, for giving such an excellent presentation. I was busy taking notes. So as you all know, I'm a newly elected municipal councillor in District 5, and in fact, accessibility was part of my campaign platform. When Grosvenor Road reconstruction was being taken on, the sidewalks were very undulating because there are a lot of parking belts along Grosvenor, and so neighbours and I got together and we put together a proposal inviting the city to review this design of the sidewalk, and we were welcome. It was my first meeting with a mayor ever, I think, and it was with Mayor Smith at the time who welcomed us. And we explained a few other aspects of design, and what happened was that the city did review the sidewalk design and did look at the cuts for the parking belts and tried to smooth them out somewhat to level those ups and downs, which if anyone's in a wheelchair or a walker can appreciate a big difference between an undulating trip and one that is a little bit more level. So when the mayor approached me to be Commissioner of Sustainability, and by the way, I'm Commissioner of Sustainability and Accessibility, so it is the first ever councillor committed and dedicated to accessibility in the city of Westmount. So I thank the mayor for introducing this commissionership, and I'm very, very proud to taking that on and making it my focus. And I'm also very thrilled to have the support of council, and I do think that there's going to be a lot of positive developments going forward in this council. So I'll just briefly speak on less practical presentation. It's going to be a less practical presentation, but more just to underline the city's commitment to accessibility. and maybe draw a little bit of the demographic portrait of the city, which will explain why there's a sudden higher interest and commitment to accessibility. So before I go, the definition of accessibility is a cross-cutting. Accessibility is a cross-cutting factor that enables persons with disabilities to live independently and participate fully in all aspects of life. To make cities accessible for all persons in society means to ensure inclusive, sustainable, and equitable development. This definition is coming from the 2006 United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So the city mentions its commitment to accessibility in a number of guiding documents. The planning program. The planning program states that it will subscribe to the principle of universal accessibility. It will propose a set of measures regarding the quality of public facilities, nature areas, and the environment in order to preserve and, where possible, improve the quality of life of its citizens. As per law, as per la loi assurant l'exercice des droits des personnes handicapées en vue de leur intégration scolaire, professionnelle et sociale, it is the city's obligation to produce an annual action plan. So in this annual action plan, the city identifies obstacles to the integration of persons with a handicap in various sectors of activity and describes the actions to reduce these obstacles. So in the plan, you'll see all the departments making lists of obstacles and a plan to reduce these obstacles. Former Mayor Trent, in his introduction to the 2017 action plan, wrote, "L'accessibilité est une préoccupation constante et nous nous efforçons d'offrir à nos citoyens un environnement aussi libre d'obstacles que possible." And the 2018 action plan is due out soon. So why the new attention to accessibility? So according to the 2016 census, 1 out of 4 Westmounters is over the age of 65. In 2011, it was 1 out of 5. So we have an aging population. The trend is towards an aging population, more so than the rest of the Aglo, which still has about 1 out of 5 over the age of 65. According to 2011 census, my data is coming from different sources, seniors are living alone. 1 out of 3 in Westmount is living alone. And we have a big announcement on a plan to fix that, or to improve the seniors living alone comfort and security. According to Stats Canada, in 2012, almost 14%, or 3.8 million Canadians, reported having a disability that limited their daily activity. But more astonishing is some data that comes out of Stats Quebec. So the Institut de la Statistique du Québec did a very in-depth survey in 2013, which is cited by many cities around the Aglo and the region. And they did a drill down on the limitations of activities, chronic illnesses, and aging. So here it goes. 36% of Westmount residents over the age of 15 have a disability, light, moderate, or serious. This is a big number. This is the second highest ranking municipality after Côte-Saint-Luc. Most residents with a disability are between the ages of 15 and 64, 55% of the cases. 45% of those with a disability are over 65 years, and those include the more serious cases. So there is a trend towards increasing people with increasing physical disabilities. But there's another trend, and this trend is the increasing number of elderly who are choosing to remain at home as opposed to moving into retirement homes, and a trend towards home care, which is strongly promoted by the governments, given the costs of healthcare and whatnot. So the onus then falls upon the municipal governments to ensure they have these people who have issues or they have a handicap, it's on the onus of the municipal governments to ensure they have a safe living environment that is adapted to their needs. So, having said all this, as commissioner, my goal is to take a look at accessibility and make sure that accessibility is a lens through which council explores all matters that come to the table. As councillors, we're actually committed to making equitable decisions. Not only equal, it has to be an equitable solutions to problems, and accessibility falls into that. So I will leave my opening remarks here. I will maybe talk more during Q&A to cite you some examples of actions that have been taken since this new council, and I'll be open to any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
All parts of the portfolio for the first time, and that's very encouraging. So our next panelist is Mona Arsenault, and as you can see, Mona is disabled. She's in a wheelchair, and very courageously she took adaptive transport to get here this evening, and so she lived the life of a person who has to get around on a daily basis, and you know, it's not easy to get around, and she did the best she could, and she got here under her own steam with whatever facilities they are provided. She lives in Laval, by the way, so it's not a trivial journey, and so we're very honoured to have her here this evening. She's a member of the MUHC Accessibility Committee, and she's also on the Royal Victoria Hospital Patients Committee, so she has many interesting insights into accessibility from the point of an end user, and we're very honoured to have her here this evening, so I'm going to hand over the microphone to her right now.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Mona Arsenault, concerned citizen. Concerned citizen. Welcome City Councillors Sebastian Lord, Professor, Catherine Blanchette-Dallard, Councillor Marina Bresky, and all the citizens of Westmount. What is disability? After the International Year of Persons with a Disability in 1980, awareness of the needs of persons with disabilities was raised. In June 2001, the Montreal International Declaration of Inclusions stated that equitable access in all areas of life is a prerequisite for human rights and fundamental freedoms of people. Yet, to this day, 38 years later, since the 1980 Declaration, although great strides and increased awareness have been achieved, barriers to the disabled remain, as we know. Deaf people use sign language to communicate, just as physically disabled persons require a wheelchair or walkers to move. So if all areas were wheelchair accessible, there would be no handicap. If people face a barrier or are restricted to certain areas, that is a handicap. My experience in all things accessible. Public transportation. Why don't more handicapped people use it? They are afraid, and rightly so. I have the chutzpah to keep trying. I had polio as a young child, and I was told, just do it, so I did. When the ramp did not work in 40 below Fahrenheit weather, I waited for the next city bus. Who would do that? The second time this happened, the woman driver called another bus to come and get me and bring me directly to my appointment. My own bus. Now I know it can be done. Another time, the ramp would not go down. So the driver asked 3 girls who were taking the bus to jump on the ramp to see if it would dislodge. It did. And I could get on. Every time I see that ramp move, I get a little thrill. Oh, the joy. But bus ramps need to be in working order at all times. Another time, when the driver let all the teenagers get on the bus before putting the ramp down for me, I had to wait in the aisle and back off the bus. I called the company and asked them to please train their drivers. Let the wheelchairs go on first. Places for wheelchairs need to be clearly marked. Have extra seating in the wheelchair areas, but have automatic lifting seats so that when I do go there, I can get in. Make public areas accessible to all people. And Marina mentioned quite a few, and Catherine. Inside buildings, make all the public bathrooms accessible to all. Please put buttons where I can reach them, and please make them work. Allow space to move around, and please make them big enough so I can close the door. We all need privacy, and this is the last thing I really want to ever have to talk about. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to enter a room so you don't have corridors with turns into the rooms or into the bathrooms? Yes, it's nice to have accessible bathrooms with changing tables, but not in the stalls. And if you do, have them lift automatically. You know, it's just a weight matter. Please make doors accessible with no pressure when they're not for fire safety. Wayfinding signs are just too high to read from a seated position. Please make them accessible. And while you're at it, could you add some braille? Floors are slippery. For example, tiles. They're hard to maneuver in wheelchairs and also for walkers, as they cause unnecessary accidents, and we really don't need more disabled complaints. Carpeted floors make it very hard for people to push manual wheelchairs. Carpal tunnel syndrome comes from wrist accidents when buttons, handles, and locks need to be twisted or reached in awkward ways. Bring them low and make them easy to maneuver. Let's stop making the handicapped more handicapped. Light switches, buttons, plugs, outlets, phone connections need to be at chair level. And you know what? Everyone could use them easily. I have a quote here from the Federal Safety Emergency Management of America. People with disabilities are entitled to the same level of protection in an emergency as everyone else. No more, no less. What I really want to know is how to leave a building safely. Let's train security to manage handicapped people when a code red is in progress. Let's train the handicapped people. Let's have handicapped people check into the security building and know where we are and how to get out. Let's save the handicapped people. Refuge areas. A refuge area is an area when you're in a building that is supposed to be safe for you in case of any hazard. Let's put braille instructions with phones and a call button for the deaf inside those areas. In the buildings that I've seen, they're outside the refuge area, which is of no use. Install independent power buttons to open these refuge doors. Outside areas and street crossings. We saw a few pictures, and Westmount seems to be very high up on the scale. I'm very pleased to see. But how many places have I been where the ramps with turns are too difficult to maneuver and usually not wide enough? Traffic lights need to be unobstructed areas, not grass or dirt, not recessed, but on the corner where they can be reached in an appropriate height. It's best to cement the area and, of course, clean it in winter. Wave buttons are the best. On a red light, all corners should have stopped traffic when pedestrians cross. My wheelchair was hit by a car on a right turn light that had a pedestrian crossing. How many no button activations? How about no button activations? Automatic timers whenever possible. There are some in Montreal, but certainly not enough. Really, who can cross a traffic-filled street in less than 30 seconds? Who would it hurt to have it 60 seconds? Conclusion. Sustainable development is a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. A healthy environment, certainly, but where everyone can enjoy it. Can development claim to be sustainable if it helps to exclude some of our citizens? The United Nations and the government of Quebec now recognize that accessibility of places and buildings for people with disabilities is part of the concept of sustainable development. The United Nations adopted its new Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 horizon. Objective 11 aims to ensure that cities and human settlements are open to all, safe, resilient, and sustainable. The construction regulations enforced in Quebec have many limits, and its application does not ensure equal access for all. With regard to the stores, in its memorandum on Bill 155 in 2015, it states, persons living with functional limitations continually are marginalized. Indeed, a cautionary note on the Quebec Construction Code still provides for exceptions to the application of accessibility standards for certain buildings. Municipalities do have the power to adopt higher accessibility requirements than the minimum standards prescribed by the code, but very few have. I look forward to the many changes to come. Thank you.
Residential choices and meanings of home, as well as the impacts of demographic changes such as aging and immigration on the evolution of territories, habitat planning and housing family travel behaviours as an MUHC employees, for example. So I'll hand over to Sebastian in a second to bring the presentation. There's this one.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you also for the previous presentation, because I will talk about all issues, all challenges for a municipality, but also for people living in the municipality. So I will show you some project and what we are working at the University of Montreal on the accessibility and more specifically on walkability of the environment for the elderly. Usually I need more than 1 hour or two to switch in English, so if you don't understand, please do not hesitate. So we are interested in what makes the city walkable for elderly people, and it can be very simple, but at the scale of a city, it can be difficult. We talk about universal accessibility, we talk about all these little things that can be very challenging to walk through. Imagine that at the scale of a city, it may be more and more complicated. But the essential elements of an age-friendly urban environment, we can resume it in 3 main issues. The accessibility to urban amenities, the sense of security of people who are walking and traveling in the city, and the availability of transit, so the option to move, to get around in the city. And maybe these options can be planned in addition to automobile, because a lot of elderly people are living in the agglo, in the suburbs, for example. So important factors need to be considered for walkability environment. So keywords are security, the objective security with the norms and the way we are building sidewalk and everything, but also the perceived security, the perceived experiences. and for sure accessibility. So people need need comfort and need positive experiences when they are walking and getting around in the city. So the walkability level of a street, of a park, of an environment is strongly contextualized. And we have done a lot of research with elderly people in downtown, in suburbs, and also in mid-sized cities around the Quebec provinces. And we talk about these walkable environment, and what people are telling us about what they choose or where they choose to walk. Mainly this corresponds to open, mostly green, and areas that are perceived as functionally adapted. And again, the perceived notion is very important. You can plan a place very with everything is according to norms and different thresholds of security. But if it's not perceived as it, people will not walk and will not go in these places. So, what different kind of environment people, elderly people like to walk? Cycling paths with low speed and few crowding. So maybe they wait to walk in this cycling path after the rush hours, for example. Waterfront for sure, and or streets with the protection for the sun. So the protection can be something built, but it can be trees, it can be vegetation. Commercial streets are very important for them, and very large sidewalk. We talked about that previously. They need also place to stop, place to rest, and place to chat. And when we plan adapted path, the scale or the distance between these places are around 200 meters or 250 meters. So we need to think about the city, and we need to think about walkable path with place to stop in strategic location. Shopping malls for daily reasons to get out. So people often tell us that they do not go one time per week to do the grocery, but they go every day to be active and to move. And for those who are living in adapted housing, the housing interior space are also very important to walk by the winter, for example, and when it's not possible to go out. So we developed a tool, we call it an urban audit. In French, c'est MAPA. In English, it's SWOT. It's very, very small, but you see every little square, it's 43 criteria. We look at the streets environment, and we noted like trees, sidewalks, if the sidewalk is in good shape, if we have space between the sidewalks and the building, etc. So a lot of little criteria that are very important for downtown. So we are able to characterize each street segment from a low walkability to a high walkability, and these are the example for a type 1 street, low walkability, to type 5 with very interesting environment to very comfortable to walk. So globally, Westmount is very interesting to walk, but we talk about the hills, we talk about the obstacle we can see between interesting place and interesting environment. And we can do the same with the intersection. So we have the street segment and also the intersection to walk to. And the thing is, for planner, universal accessibility is very, very important, but as a planner, we need to think the city and how people are reaching grocery stores, clinics, and hospital, etc. So we need to think about the city as a whole, but it will be very difficult to have the type 5 everywhere. It will cost a lot of money, and as a planner, we try to think about what we can do if we want the type 4, the type 5, a very interesting environment. And we develop a way to do intervention on the city with the concept of walkability hubs. So we identify every potential or every amenities, every park, every interesting place in the city. This is the example of Gatineau in the Ottawa agglomeration. So you see all these little dots. This is commercial destination, leisure, place where it's interesting to walk, and we identify some key areas to maybe invest more, maybe think about the accessibility in a universal way. And we think also to make a network with that, with different places to do intervention. We cannot change every streets of a city, but we can choose strategic path in the city where we find key destination, for example, where we find parks, etc. And on these paths we can put benches, we can put urban mobilier, furniture, yeah. So to concentrate the intervention. So this is the conclusion, so how to make intersection, for example, or the street segment more secure, so reduce the vehicle speed, so this is not the main issue in Westmount. Reduction of crossing area with elevation of crossing path, maybe, the quality of crossing spaces, development of design of the waiting area, benches, etc. Maybe think about the full red light intersection, so without cars when it is time for the pedestrians. Sorry, and maybe we can go out the planning perspective. We also need maybe training campaigns and for specific group, at-risk group, and the adaptation of crossing time with slower running speed for sure. And it can be regulated electronically. For example, some countries in Europe are using a card like Opus card for elderly people, and when they put the card, they have more time to cross the street, for example, because these cards are you can buy your
membership
subscription to transit with your age, so it can be easily implemented. So thank you.
It's always interesting to hear from urban planning professional. And I think we've had 4 very interesting and different presentations this evening. So now I want to throw the floor open to the audience to present your concerns and questions to the panelists. So I've got this wireless microphone. We have a microphone here on the table so we can have the panelists answer your questions. So who would like to ask the first question? Let's go to
also walking cycling association. So you mentioned at the start about the hills in Westmount, and you know, that's something which is, I think it's on the, I think the mayor, you have something, you're planning on eliminating the hills at Westmount. Is that? But certainly there are, I'm sure there are things that can be done to allow it easier for people with some kind of difficulties getting around, to get around more easily in a hilly environment. And, you know, I can think of a few. I don't know what you think has been done elsewhere or what you think could be done from the panelists to try and, because, you know, you're right, a lot of seniors, and, you know, the hills, and you've got the big houses up in the hill, and many of those are certainly inhabited by single people and getting older. And so what can be done to make it easier for them to get down the actions down Sherwood Street and get around and feel socially active and physically active?
Comments about how wouldn't it be great to have a white snow policy like Bay d'Urfé? On the one hand, complaining that we are salting too much and putting too much sand. And then on the other hand, I also got a comment saying, well, you missed a few spots and I need to get to a bus stop. And so as Commissioner of Sustainability and Accessibility, sometimes you gotta look at these saying, oh, from an environmental point of view, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have all this salt that corrodes our metals, and you know, it's hard for us to breathe. People even complained that their dogs were getting sniffles because they were, but then on the other hand, you've got accessibility issues. So safety is first and foremost a priority. So you know, you've got to look at that. So that's a comment about salting, and so Westmount does salt and does use sand as well.
Clean. It doesn't require more salt, it requires more cleaning. And that would solve the problem for both manual wheelchairs and electric wheelchairs. An electric wheelchair works very well in the snow, but it doesn't work in the slush. And what happens when you clean the streets is the slush goes into the curb where the curb goes down. So these are the smaller problems, but brushing or just more sidewalk cleaning would be good. Accessible buses. Montreal has gone out of their way to make the public transport accessible to wheelchairs. Almost every bus has a wheelchair sign on it. The problem is it's not maintained. So what we need to do is have them maintain the bus. The drivers, I've spoken to the drivers, they're very caring, they're very interested. What happens is they don't test the bus before they take it out. Most of the disability problems come from not looking at the solution. The solutions are usually simple. You know, bathroom accessibility. Almost everything in that room can be adapted with very little cost. You know, a mirror that's tipped forward. Simple things to be looked at. Urban planners could look not only at the streets, but at the actual buildings. Thank you.
Sebastian.
In the provincial government, are there no grants that can be accessed by cities, maybe, who want to make sure that their cities are more accessible so that they could then have these push doors and things like that? I don't know if that's possible, but I know I've worked for certain organizations where these push doors have been added to the access of those buildings, and I understood that there was money that came from a government or some source. So that's what I'm sort of curious about, if that's been looked into. Marina, I don't know if that's a possibility, but I think that would definitely make us more accessible. And I think we have an opportunity here in Westmount to show the rest of the city what we're capable of doing and make us really very accessible and be the window for the rest of the city of Montreal.